Picture this. You're in the garage, hands covered in grease. Just finished tuning up your engine with a part you found on eBay. And then you realize, you know what? I could also use new brakes. So, where do you go next? Back to eBay. You can find anything there. It's unreal. Wipers, headlights, even cold air intakes. It's all there. And you've got eBay guaranteed fit. You order a part, and if it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. Look, DIY fixes can be major. Doesn't matter if it's just maintenance or a major mod. You got it, especially when things are guaranteed to fit. So, when you dive into your next car project, start with eBay. All the parts you need at prices you love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. This episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast has a mission. We need to explain and discuss everything that's happened in the USGP in under 30 minutes. And if one of us pushes the other one longer, if this episode goes beyond 30 minutes, the person who's getting late will get a 5-second time penalty. Explain that to me, guys. How does that work out? Kunal, why don't you tell me what this is all about?
I'm actually remembered of, that Oprah Winfrey meme that has been going around the internet. You get a 5-second time penalty. He gets a 5-second time penalty. She gets a 5-second time penalty. We all get a 5-second time penalty. But you don't get one. You don't get any penalty if you're Mr. Max Verstappen. Is that where you're going, Soumil Arora?
I am struggling to understand how things work out. Let me pull up a couple of images to show you more about this.
While you do that, and since we've got millions of listeners in the Netherlands, I actually have done a lot of dissecting this afternoon, evening, whatever you call it. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I sort of understand why Max Verstappen did not get a penalty and why the FIA were possibly right here. But yes, I stick with what Damon Hill actually said, that we just need better rules. We just need different rules because Max Verstappen knows exactly what that rule book is like. He knows exactly how to drive, to defend, to exploit that rule book, just the way Red Bull knows how to exploit it off track. That's why they're such a good combination. The driver knows how to exploit it on track. Red Bull does the exploitation off track. Which, of course, I mean that they are, every loophole. We had this loophole going in about the bib tray adjustment and beautiful complexity of Formula One coming in. Suddenly, like, what bib? I just know the bib my daughter used to wear when she was 1 year old eating food. What is this bib that a car has got?
Exactly.
And although sometimes it might come across as unethical, but the thing is that if you're playing by the book, then that's how it is. We often question if it's in the spirit of the game, if it's right or wrong. But as long as they're playing to the rule book, and that's what Red Bull does so well. And I think even Aston Martin has done that to some extent as well over the last years, especially when they had that year when they copied the Mercedes and everything, and they tried to really try and justify that. But you really need to know, it goes to show that you really, really need to know the rule book, the sporting regulations, so that it helps you negotiate these things better with the stewards and even try and carry out a couple of maneuvers on track, which is what Max exactly did.
And since we are on this, they were actually applauded. They, being Red Bull Racing, were actually applauded by Lewis Hamilton, of all the people. He said there's a reason why Red Bull wins championships. There's a reason why they keep innovating. Our sport is all about innovation. And he was actually applauding them for having done exactly that. So clearly Soumil Arora is making those bib tray adjustment changes.
Yes.
Which is why his track is suddenly changed and something else is going to change again. But
I mean, we told you we're testing out that little upgrade of ours as well, and we told you we might have a few issues here and there. It happens with every car, with every team in the paddock in Formula One. So we are also experiencing a few technical issues with our slideshow. But yes, what's been the big talking point, Kunal, as per you?
Oh, the big talking point, as per me, I've just put it up now, okay, because Soumil had issues bringing it up.
We have
Clearly,
visuals.
We have visuals, yes. I think what is my biggest talking point? I think we all need to remember the biggest talking point was Ferrari scoring a 1-2 finish. Their first time they scored a 1-2 finish in the USA since 2006, which was back in the Michael Schumacher era. And it's not just the 1-2 finish itself, but how they did it, why they did it in the first place. And to me, that's the most appealing part about their story, about their win. And there's always this thing every time you want to make fun of any team getting things wrong, it's Ferrari. But this is now proving to be the other way, saying if you crack a joke on Ferrari, there is a good chance possibly the joke is actually on you now.
I mean, yeah, unfortunately, Ferrari has been the butt of all jokes in these last couple of seasons. But I've actually been against that, because Ferrari, although they've had their pit stop failures over these last couple of years, and many of which has actually been extremely comical, they are one of the faster teams in the pit stops. And also, we often sit and speak ill of their strategy. I think on the driver's behalf as well, on Leclerc's behalf, I think he was very, very straightforward with the sort of strategy that he wants. The team gave him just that. And even if you look at Monza, they executed a brilliant strategy. So I think we are beyond the stage where we sit and mock Ferrari for the strategy or for their pit stops. The team executed a brilliant race, and that's the result of it. A brilliant 1-2. Multiple 1-2s for Ferrari this year, which they've not done since 2017. So Ferrari is definitely doing well, and I think it deserves a lot of appreciation for that.
There's an interesting slide over here, guys, which shows a fun record that Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc have broken this weekend. Ever since Ferrari won their last championship, guess who has the most 1-2s? It's them, 3. I thought it would be Vettel and Raikkonen, to be honest with you, but what they've done here is genuinely unbelievable. And at a point, it could have been Sainz had he had the better start, but fair play, Kunal. I mean, 4th to 1st, it's never happened before. I think there was a fun stat that I read somewhere that nobody has ever gotten to the lead of the USGP below the front row. And Leclerc has just done that.
Yes, Charles Leclerc did what I got a snapshot of Spain 2024. George Russell started P4, overtook and was, first. That's what happened here as well. But I believe, didn't P4 also take the lead last year? Or was it P6? That was Max Verstappen who took the lead.
The win, not the lead.
Yeah.
In the first lap.
Okay, Max Verstappen did win from P6 last year.
Yeah.
So he won from P6. Yes, that's correct. But yeah, to me, I knew, and I said this on our podcast, that turn 1, how it goes into Phil Hill. P2 was so critical in either taking the lead or in this case messing it up, because Max Verstappen was clear. I'm just going to mess up Lando Norris as much as I can psychologically, make it so tough for him to battle against me. And Formula One in this autumn break put up a post saying we've enjoyed them going wheel to wheel. Well, no, the truth is they've not gone wheel to wheel. I can think of Austin as the only race when they went wheel to wheel. Otherwise, every race, one driver had a significant performance advantage over the other. Okay, where it was directly a move that was happening. They weren't going wheel to wheel, so to say. So they finally again went wheel to wheel yesterday. That's my reading of the Lando Norris, Max Verstappen wheel to wheel battles for the championship. And that's what happened in turn 1. Max took the inside line, rotated the car late, which is well within his rights. And then the two Ferraris actually just realized that, guess what? We can we can barge in, we can find our way in. And that's precisely what happened. And I think the the interesting part for me here is that, like Soumil said, it was about which Ferrari was in the lead. The Ferrari that was in the lead would have won the race. That's why Carlos Sainz was just staying within that 5 second window of Charles Leclerc. And Leclerc, after he took that win, showed the pace on that medium tire, which was so decisive even in the sprint, which is where Ferrari, again, if they had just started a little higher up, they would have probably won the sprint as well. This is a picture from the start. As we can see, Max Verstappen clearly aiming for the outside edge of the track, not even the outside curve of the track. But look at the angle and difference between the two Ferraris and where they are pointed at.
The fun part is, after the race, Leclerc spoke to the media and said that I knew this would happen because Verstappen would be busy defending against Lando Norris. Lando would be busy trying to attack Max Verstappen because remember, both of them are fighting for the championship. And he said, all I wanted to do was get the best run towards the outside of turn one's entry so that I can swoop down the inside. And that's precisely what he did, which is so smart in my opinion. It's like he saw it coming. And on the Ferrari bit, right, why did they not qualify higher up? It's a weird scenario. We're hearing from the last couple of races, especially Singapore, that their tyre warm-up procedure could be something to do with it. In Singapore, it was evident. I'm not sure if that's exactly the case here. But whatever it is, Ferrari in qualifying are not the best. But if it is warming up the tyres, that's the issue. Their gentleness towards it is helping them manage the tyres in the race. Because in the sprint race, we saw Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc be much better than Lando Norris, who chewed up his tyres while being behind Max, whereas Carlos and Charles were in a battle, didn't. So it's absurd how there are different characteristics of a race car that are making it better, and those marginal differences are what's causing the difference between the winner and maybe the team that's in P3.
Marginal difference. Yeah. I'll go back to this image. Yes.
Yeah, if you come back to this image, I just want you to look at something over here because you don't tend to see this in other tracks, say Baku or anywhere else. Look how wide the track is over here.
Yeah.
We often complain about how narrow tracks are these days, and even if you compare this to a Spain or an Austria, this is pretty wide. This is probably the widest section of any corner that we've seen on the F1 calendar, and you can see cars literally 5 wide going into the first corner, and it's incredible. And this shows how unique this corner is in Formula One in general, not just on this track. But the thing is about the first corner here, and even turn 12, is the turning radius is so, I don't know, obtuse or acute, because if you take the inside line, you're almost destined to go off track.
Yeah.
And this is something, like you mentioned, Leclerc would know. If you are going to go on the inside line, you cannot help but stay or go overshoot the corner and go off track. That's exactly what's happened on every single overtake that we saw around turn 12. Someone trying to take the inside line rather than a wider line entry point into it. That's exactly what happened here as well. Verstappen is so engrossed in trying to take the lead from Norris that both of them overshoot, and they just literally handed the lead on the platter to Leclerc.
Can we?
But I would say,
just a second.
I would say,
can we say thank you to Herman Tilke, because this is his creation. We often slander him so much. I think with the Circuit of the Americas, he's done a perfect job, because every single corner this weekend, we've seen amazing racing. So stuff like that,
it's a beautiful track. It's a beautiful track which often produces amazing racing. Even if he's picked up bits from other circuits, it's worked out so well in the end. And we often get to see amazing racing around this track, especially in the first and the last sectors. And it's extremely challenging.
And going back to the start, okay, I'm pretty sure Max Verstappen knew that if he does what he did to Lando Norris, he's going to lose the lead of the race or lose positions, etc. But he knew that he wouldn't lose position to Lando Norris.
Yeah.
Okay, at every point of time this race weekend, Max Verstappen's single-minded focus was not letting Lando finish ahead of him, letting Lando know how difficult, how tough, how bull-headed, pig-headed an opponent he can be. He, being Max Verstappen, can be when it comes to a title battle. And, if Max could take on Lewis Hamilton in his prime in that Mercedes, when Mercedes was in their prime, I think McLaren and Lando Norris are still figuring out, like Soumil said when we were preparing, it's almost like everyone is scared to
Yeah.
overtake Max Verstappen if you do not have a significant delta on his Red Bull RB20 or whatever that car is this year.
Yeah.
And I think one of the important things is for Verstappen is to displace Norris off P1, because the gap, the points margin between P1 to P2 is 7 points, and thereafter it is 3 points. So even if Norris is second, you're still only losing 3 points to him rather than 7 points if he is leading the race. So I think he did a brilliant job of actually displacing him from the first, and even if he it cost him the lead, it actually eventually helped him in terms of points overall, since it's a championship that really matters at this point.
But before we forget, we have to remember that Ferrari 1-2 is that one big moment from this race weekend. Frederick Vasseur, job-saving moment. I think and it's important for Ferrari. He's been brought on so that they stop this downward spiral, and I think Frederick Vasseur has done that. And what I'm loving in this whole Ferrari resurgence is the beautiful timing that Lewis Hamilton is going to join there 5 races from now as well. So if Ferrari actually remain this way, where they just are quick enough, I think in Hamilton they'll have an even further step of a driver who's able to bring results that don't sort of are better than the merit of the package altogether. Sometimes, most of the times. But one image that I have to talk of is the sprint. When I saw the sprint and when I saw Carlos Sainz and Leclerc go hammer and tongs and then go overtake Russell, and then at least Sainz got the better of Lando Norris.
Yes.
I knew there and then itself this is going to be Ferrari's race, because the medium was always supposed to be the key race starting tire. Last year as well. Yeah. The difference between last year this year was, it's a 2-stopper. So you would have run two stints on the medium, and if you're running 2/3 of the race on a tire which you're the quickest on, you have a very, very good chance of winning. And that's what Carlos Sainz said, after the sprint, saying we've got a chance to win if I don't start so further back as I did in the sprint race. I think if they started further up in the sprint race, they would have probably had the pace to overtake Max Verstappen. But Soumil, I can see on the internal chat board we have here, you've pinged, did we discuss Ferrari's upgrades? And to me, that's actually the most beautiful part. This table right out here, it's the upgrades table for Austin. Okay. Formula One puts this up pretty much every race weekend, hyping up all the upgrades that they come. We've discussed several times before on our show how an upgrade is not necessarily an upgrade. It could also be a downgrade, is even more so in this era, in this rule set of Formula One. But also, Ferrari and Williams have got 0 upgrades, while McLaren and Haas had 7 upgrades. Okay. The other context which is missing here is just because you bring an upgrade doesn't mean you end up using that upgrade. True. Because the team could say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with the upgrade. Thank you. I'm not going to use it. I'll go back to the previous race specification. But yeah, here you go, Soumil. Here's your upgrades table.
Exactly. This is the same package that Ferrari were using in Baku, in Monza, and I think a few races before. Singapore as well, if I'm not mistaken. And for Mercedes also, interestingly, even though they got a lot of new upgrades, I think they were using the same floor as Canada, which is what George Russell ended up saying. And that powered them to such a good result with a comeback from P20 to P6. And this is the best part about the budget cap, where we're at such a high peak of performance that you never know if anything else, any addition can make you go even higher. And that's the incredible part. And Ferrari doing this in spite of McLaren having an almost new car, in spite of Red Bull Racing bringing significant changes. Yeah, that's quite something. And the first Adrian Newey upgrade hasn't quite worked at this particular circuit. We shall wait and see how it goes around other times. But that's a big story, Kunal.
Yeah, before we go to the upgrades for Red Bull and non-Adrian Newey, etc., what you just said, I think the key thing to remember here, and this is for a lot of fans, new and old, is that just because you get an upgrade doesn't mean you go quick, like we've said. And why does that happen? Right? One of the reasons is upgrades take longer to sort of fine tune and get your car in that balance window. A lot of times you'll hear drivers complaining of balance, which means they cannot attack the slow speed and the high speed stuff with equal confidence. You're either trading off one for the other, which is costing you time in one, even if you're gaining a little bit of time back in the other. But what drivers essentially need, and what the McLaren has had most of the races this year, is that beautiful balance between the slow speed and the high speed stuff. So that's one part. But Ferrari, what they've done is they've just used track time. And one of the things that this rule set has also done is, especially in the ground effects era of Formula One, the simulation models are not as accurate for most of the teams, which is why the minute teams are bringing upgrades, or in the case of McLaren, they delayed upgrades for a few races because they were just worried, saying, wow, everyone else is going backwards. What if we go backwards as well? So the simulation models are not as accurate, which means that any amount of track time, track data, real life data that you get is so much more valuable. So by not bringing upgrades, Ferrari just trusted what they knew about their car, their setup, to bring it in that beautiful balance window. And that's the magic. And that's why it's not just the 1-2 that happened, but how that 1-2 happened for Ferrari.
Yeah.
That's the story for me from this race weekend, before we actually go into what Lando Norris and Max Verstappen got themselves into. But before we go there, there's one small stat from Sundaram on Ferrari.
No, I think that's very beautifully explained by you, Kunal. But ultimately, Ferrari's 1-2 and impressive showing in the sprint as well meant that they took 55 points out of the 59 points available this weekend. 55 out of 59. That's the most by any team this season. Not even by McLaren, not even by Red Bull. That's the most by any team this season. And that's actually meant Ferrari is within 8 points of Red Bull in the Constructors' title. Yeah. Forget Red Bull catching up to McLaren. I think they've firmly let go of that title right now. Now Red Bull's struggling to even hold on to second. And if they drop down to third, that will be the first time Red Bull would not be at the top two of the Constructors' standing since 2.5 years. 2022 Australia, I believe. And that's going to be a sign of worry for Red Bull. Quite clearly, because the other two teams have both their drivers performing, and Red Bull in that regard is bleeding since Verstappen's taking a bulk of the points. But yeah, this might change in the next race.
McLaren 544 points, 40 points ahead of Red Bull Racing with 504. But the battle that we are all discussing is Ferrari with 496 points, just 8 points away. So literally could be this race weekend where Ferrari ends up outscoring Red Bull Racing. And then, goes off to claim P2. And this is where I know, Sundaram, lots of people would have already pinged you, much like I've pinged ChatGPT and Google. I think it was 1983, where the last time when the drivers' champion actually was driving a car that finished third in the Constructors' Championship. I think so.
Must have been Keke Rosberg or something, right?
Yeah, I think it was 82? Nelson Piquet, and in 82 it was Rosberg. But I haven't double-checked that because I realized I have F1 Stats Guru I can ask.
I'm thinking.
It almost could have been Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso in 2007. Almost. Because they were dead last.
Yeah.
And to know more,
but
we'll have a separate episode about that.
Yes. But this is what Soumil wants to get at, which is the Drivers' Championship. Okay. Partly. Are we still banking that Norris is going to take that? Or are we just like, okay, now it's about Verstappen just banking it in the next 3-4 races?
I've never banked on that.
Same.
Look, Leclerc is closer to Norris than Norris is to Verstappen. So I don't think so Norris is fighting for the championship. He's fighting for P2 at this rate.
Yeah.
And at this rate, do you guys think Leclerc is going to overtake Norris? Any chance of that happening?
I mean, it would be very reactionary of us to say yes. We need to hold our prancing horses a little bit and wait, because the other races will reveal a lot. Like, we could expect Ferrari to be good at Las Vegas, for sure. Qatar is McLaren territory, firmly, from last year, and we're not sure how the upgrades are going to change things around that way. Yas Marina also seems, as it stands, McLaren territory, because generally they've been good at the mixed circuits, but then Circuit of the Americas has been a different story. It's fun. It's fun. There's really no way to tell per se, but I love the fact that it's anyone's guess at the moment.
No, I'll tell you why I'm more upbeat about Ferrari, because no upgrades is one thing, but Monza, Baku, Singapore, 3 run of races where Ferraris had a great run were all outliers. Okay, it was always Austin that they said that's the biggest litmus test for our upgrades package because it's a real race circuit. And Frederick Vasseur beautifully explained Sector 1 is all the high speed stuff, Sector 3 is all the slow speed stuff. You got to sort of compromise one of the two. And typically, if you guys remember, Ferrari would be quicker in the slow speed stuff but miss out on the high speed stuff.
Yeah.
But here, Ferrari were quick even in the high-speed stuff. They could get rid of that high-speed bouncing with the upgrades that they brought in. So, yes, things were different last year. But yes, I think even more, Ferrari is very, very different this year. They've finally found a solution. So I'm actually very upbeat to see maybe Charles Leclerc, and if Carlos Sainz is going to be in there as well. Maybe it's a battle for P2 in the Drivers' Championship. That's going to hot up, and not just the battle for P1. Because clearly what we also saw this race weekend was this, which is the image I'm going to hunt for, which is Lando Norris, of course, on pole, which was a great pole lap. He needed to be on pole, and he got that pole. But where's he gone? Where's it gone? Come on, where's that image we've put?
Right at the very top, I recollect.
There we go. Before our introduction as well. Okay, there we go. There we go. That's the image.
Oh, wait. Actually,
clearly the image
we've given everything away.
We've given everything away. Wait. Let's go to the right. This is, if you're listening, that's on our screen is Verstappen pushing Norris off wide today. Let's go one slide to the right, Kunal. That would be Russell forcing off Valtteri Bottas wide. He got a 5-second penalty for that. And in this case, this picture might not show it, but Russell actually went off track for that. Let's go another slide to the right, because there's another story here. Brazil 2021.
This image needs no explanation. But
yeah,
okay,
and that image, by the way, if you're listening, folks, is Verstappen pushing Lewis Hamilton. Actually, not pushing Lewis Hamilton. Like driving Lewis Hamilton
off
now.
the road.
Exactly. He might have taken it all the way to Rio de Janeiro from Sao Paulo. That way. Disgusting, honestly. And I don't hate Max. In fact, let me frame it this way. I'm a big fan of the way Max doesn't crack under pressure. The battle with Lando Norris, having someone as good as Lando, someone as fast as Lando behind you for such a long time, can make the best of the very best crack. Lando Norris cracked on the final lap of the sprint race when Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc came calling. Verstappen's defense was immaculate. My entire point is, why does Max have to resort to tactics like this to stay ahead when he's good enough, in fact, better than anyone else, to keep it on track? Because when you move a slide to the right, as we should show right now, this picture will show you the defense that Max Verstappen had for this. 2017 USGP, Verstappen got penalized for passing over the white line, but here he was clearly on the inside of Kimi Raikkonen at the long right-hander. And in the press conference, Max says, I got penalized for this. It's clear that you can't pass over the white line, but Kimi Raikkonen didn't force you off the line, my friend. I'm confused, Sundaram, because if Russell can get penalized for this, I heard one more driver got penalized for a similar story this weekend as well. I fail to understand why Verstappen doesn't. I'm a huge fan of him, but it's a weird scenario here.
I get what you mean, because he's such a brilliant driver in itself that he really does not need to resort to such tactics to kind of stay ahead. But that's probably how he really does his racing. It's do or die, and ultimately it's kind of created this sort of a situation where people kind of think twice before battling him at all. Yeah. He's created this image that, I'm going to go completely all out and you have to figure your way around this. Like you said, Leclerc knew Verstappen's going to be going against Norris on the opening corner. He's created this image of himself that people think twice about battling him. But what confuses me even more are the regulations, are the rules in itself. Yeah. It is so ambiguous, because I think the stewards did well in all the other penalties that were applied. But when it comes to Verstappen, everything goes for a toss. Verstappen and Sainz had a similar situation in this very race, where Sainz was coming from behind. They both were very close to each other at the apex. Both of them, Verstappen goes off much wider than Sainz. Verstappen gets to keep the position after he you can say, gets past Sainz there. It wasn't very different. But if you read the regulations very carefully, you'd realize that ultimately what they're speaking about is the car that's ahead at the apex has the advantage. And in this case, it really helped Verstappen. He was just exploiting the rule book until the stewards penalize him. They did not penalize him. He might go on to do this later on as well.
But, Kunal, I fail to understand how a driver can get past if it is fair for the defending car to push you off the road and go off themselves. If it's an error under braking, it's understood. And stewards can spot that. Derek Warwick was the chief steward this time. He's good enough. He's been in Formula One for long enough. He knows those things. But all four wheels of the track, that's unfair. There's no other way to put it.
Well. Okay. This is a iconic image. We can see all four wheels of the track for Max. We can see all four wheels of the track for Lando Norris. The crucial part here is that Lando Norris is ahead of Max Verstappen. Wait with me. Just see that. If you see Bottas versus Russell, which is the next image, Bottas is behind George Russell, right? What the FIA has done, I completely stand with what you blokes are saying. The rule book, Max knowing what the rules are, Max knowing where to exploit them, etc. And I'm sure if we see the telemetry of that lap, entering the braking zone, Lando Norris was ahead. You can actually see it on his onboard that Max is not alongside the visuals of the camera of the onboard. Then as soon as they start braking and decelerating, my guess, and I'm very sure I haven't seen telemetry data for this, but it's pretty obvious, Max let go of the brake. So he then came alongside with a lot more speed to the apex. So then that was the strike in the FIA rulebook saying I'm ahead at the apex. By the time they started rotating the car, Lando Norris, who was on the outside, had to slow down even more so, which is why by the time they rotated the car, Norris wasn't alongside enough Max Verstappen to have the right of way for, he threw me off the track sort of thing. Okay, so that's how the FIA saw the situation. Am I saying it's fair? I'm just saying that's where the rules are and that's where they adjudicated them. Do we need a change? We absolutely do. Does it seem fair that the driver, who also exceeded track limits didn't get a penalty, but the driver who was forced to exceed track limits got a track penalty? Yes, it doesn't seem fair, but that's, like I said, the rule book in itself. But let me build on this scenario more, because before we actually had Lando Norris, overtake Max, what happened is Lando ran out of road and he realized that there's gravel. There isn't gravel, there is tarmac. I can drive off that tarmac. He went onto the tarmac and his actual overtaking was off the track.
Sure.
And that's where the FIA said, you know what? That is definitely not allowed. Yes, both the cars went off. Yes, all of that happened. Track limits, everything. But you cannot do. So again, I think it's like, in lots of countries, you have a pyramid of rules you can break. Okay. Even if you run a red light, you better never run a cop standing at the red light saying you got to stop now. If you know what I mean, I'm just giving an example. So that pyramid is maybe what the FIA followed, saying yes, everyone is over track limits. Lots of drivers have gone over track limits at turn 12. Fine, we'll keep giving a track limit penalty, 3 strikes, 4th strike is 5 seconds, etc. But you cannot overtake off track, and that's what Lando Norris did. That's what I think McLaren also sort of did not read the situation right and just had a bad error of judgment when it came to telling Lando Norris, keep position. We think you were done right. We think you were thrown off track. I think a lot of emotions came into play and not logic.
That's true. But to be fair to McLaren, there's not enough time in that moment in time to go back and rewind. I'm not sure if they have the tools to do that. They might have tools for their onboards, but I'm not sure if they have access to Max's onboards and the same frame-by-frame stuff.
They have access to every onboard, every data, every telemetry, everything. It's open. In that moment, yes.
With the broadcast camera angles too.
They have more data and view images than any one of us. They have people just tracking other drivers. How do you think a driver making some change on the steering wheel and something weird happening on the car is actually caught?
Yeah,
It's
of
because
course.
teams are actively tracking what their rivals are doing. Like how, when the Mercedes had the DAS system, the dual axis system with the car would lower. How do you think they caught that? He wasn't a fan.
Yeah.
They see that, oh wow, something's happening, oh wow, that's happened on the straight, so they knew exactly what was happening. And I think emotions got better there because Max was not quick enough. He didn't have the tire delta. Lando was. And each time in situations like these, McLaren just end up playing the victim card, which it's great, they're winning a lot of social fan following, love, all of that, but it's not winning them championships. And
no, but wouldn't you do the same?
what
Kunal?
matters?
Wouldn't you? I mean, if there is a slight ambiguity in that moment, and it's very easy to look at it and say Max pushed Lando out, and Lando was hence forced off. They didn't want to take their chances. They left it to the FIA, is the way I'm looking at it, and the FIA then came up with their judgment. But my problem with the FIA then is, again. Wait, I forgot what I was saying. 1 second. My problem with the...
Your problem with the FIA is they are the FIA.
No. They could have a better solution to this. In MotoGP, you get a 3-second penalty. Or you could just ask to let the other rider past. Just let the other driver past. End of story.
But
just
I
let
think
them
the solution
go.
is...
And then... Because a 5-second penalty can be applied differently. It can have implications later in the race, right? Because then you can... manage your timing accordingly to make sure that you go away from it. Just let the driver past. If you think Lando's move was unfair, which again, now we've found out that it is unfair, and it's also unfair that Max pushed him out, let Max go past and then settle it out. Because by giving Lando a penalty and not Max, you're saying that what Max did was okay, but what Lando did was not okay. But it's evident that what Max did was also not right. Going off the track and then taking someone else out.
Absolutely. It's like Max knew that he could take another track limits strike, and he took it in this battle against Lando Norris. And like I said on Viaplay last night, I was against it. I'm not saying Max doesn't deserve a penalty. I'm just saying that the way the rules are written, like Sundaram has been saying, like Damon Hill has tweeted, there's something about these rules. Yeah. It just seems unfair that there's a driver forced off track who then is eventually forced to then, make an overtake on track because he's tried all he could for like 10, 12 laps at end. And finally he gets the moment and he's told, actually, you know what, you did it off track, which is also true. So I just think Max Verstappen knows exactly how to exploit this rule book of overtaking, smart. And he does that.
Very smart.
And you got to take every tool that you have to the fight. They've taken the car, they've taken the rule book, they've taken the controversies, they've taken the radio. In this case, he also took an extra track limit strike that he could afford to have. He said, of course I'm going to use that. I'm allowed 3 times. What's the point of going home with one? And not having one of those podium trophies, which anyway I did not have.
Yeah, I think that's what...
Go ahead.
I think that's what differentiates you from a midfield team with a championship team. You know every rule in the book. You know every single loophole. You know what to do where, and that's what differentiates you from every other team. There, you're there. You're a champion for a reason.
Absolutely. Again, just
and we should answer why Max Verstappen did not get a time penalty in this case. We need to look at Max as a standalone driver because that's what the FIA has done. Every and any driver who's crossed track limits more than 3 times gets a time penalty. Max Verstappen did not cross it more than 3 times. That's the ruling.
The rule...
I'm just breaking it down. I'm not saying by any means British fans, Mexican fans, fans from Mars, wherever y'all are tuning in from.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just explaining this is the deduction that's there. Everyone feels unfair. Everyone, maybe even some of the Dutch fans said, oh my goodness, that sort of driving and Max did not get a penalty. There we go.
Yeah, but that's so smart. That's like Michael Schumacher-esque from Max, to be honest. That's recognizing every small advantage you can get. Yeah, that's unbelievable. You see, that's the point. He's so smart. He's so good. He's so good at these things. Come on, Max. Come on. Yeah, that's... that doesn't take anything... in fact, just because I feel that McLaren are sort of hard done by this doesn't take any criticism away from Lando and the way he managed everything as well. Like the start, for instance. Good one in the sprint, not so good one over here. There's still lots of things to do. And McLaren are waiting for that time when Lando can become a Max, because these are things where Max is just that little bit better. And they need that sort of complete driver to manage it.
Absolutely. But you know what? We've been discussing the what and how of this whole incident. I don't think so. We've appreciated the driving between the both of them
Very good,
throughout
yeah.
this race. Even on the opening lap, or even throughout that whole battle that they had leading up to that, the last 10 or 15 laps, they drove brilliantly. And I think that needs to be appreciated, and that needs to be spoken about, because these are the best drivers that we have at this point. And like you said, Verstappen did not drop it. And you have these reminders every few years that go to show why he is a world champion. Norris at Imola, I think Sainz and Verstappen a couple of years ago in Canada. This just goes to show that beyond that first title, Verstappen has been able to really absorb the pressure and not buckle under it. And that needs to be spoken about more than the incident itself.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, and this like I'm going to say something I again said on Viaplay last night, because we've got a lot of listeners from Norway as well for the podcast. And thank you for listening. But the key point, and I'm pretty sure you both agree with me, is 2024 is a battle between a talented driver in the best car versus the best driver of this generation.
I agree. Without a doubt.
Max Verstappen's defense was so immaculate. He did not make a single error. Lap after lap, lap after lap. He figured what that delta should be. He tried driving to that delta, come what may. Then after a point, it was just about his tires not staying with him. And that was the strategy. McLaren went longer with Lando to create a 6-lap tire delta. And that's what they had. And despite all that fighting, Lando, whose tires would have been pretty messed up after all the of the mauling that he had with Max Verstappen, eventually did not end up being on the podium. And Oscar Piastri was also in that battle, mind you guys. And this was on the radio channel in two ways. First is McLaren told Oscar, Max is mostly going to get a penalty for that. Pick up your pace so you're within that 5-second window for Max. So Max could have gone from 3rd to 5th. Okay. Then they realized, oh my goodness, the penalty is actually to Lando. So they told Oscar, you need to drop another second back. So Lando could finish ahead of Oscar Piastri as well. But yeah, well, there we go.
Before we get to Haas, we need to just take a second to talk about Oscar Piastri. He isn't what we... There's that little bit missing. There's clearly that little bit missing. The sprint qualifying, then the way the race was managed as well, there is that little bit missing.
But
you mean overall or just one race?
Overall.
Like give him the time. Give him the time. This is his second season. We've given Lando Norris how many years? 6 years for him to reach this situation. And I think in that regard, I think Oscar Piastri is really doing well.
Yeah,
and he has improved compared to last year. And probably he's still learning a couple of things in Formula One within that team, which Norris already knows a lot better. So the only thing I see is that he's improved, and there's quite a few things to improve as well.
Maybe I like him so much that I want him to improve faster.
Absolutely. He's definitely a talent. He's definitely a different talent. He's definitely a different talent in that regard, but probably we might see a different or a better version of him next year. Maybe he's fighting for the championship next year.
A lot of our fans who are Gen Zs, like Soumil Arora is, need to keep this in mind. Yes, I'm also, despite not being Gen Z, I don't know, I'm a millennial or whatever they call it, or no, Gen Y or some crap. Anyway, we all want Oscar Piastri to learn what he has to learn faster.
Yes.
No doubt about that. Okay. But I have two theories. Firstly, if you're going to back Oscar Piastri, you need to back him through the bad days, period. There is no just fair weather. And not just, I don't mean this to you. In general, I'm saying this for any driver anyone would support. The second theory I have is Lando Norris, knowing that he's in a title battle, and probably his only title battle, because we don't know what's going to happen next year, and we definitely don't know what's going to happen the year after that, right? Lando Norris has sort of taken a step forward, especially in qualifying. And I have some numbers to explain that, right? And I think Piastri's big struggles, like we've been agreeing, is that 1-lap pace, that the ability to extract that massive qualifying lap like we saw Lando do in COTA. Again, it's down to confidence, it's down to experience. So what is the step? What are the numbers saying when it comes to this step between Lando and Oscar? And I know we've got our introduction slide here. I'm going to just leave it because we can do a quick introduction 44 minutes in to this episode. Since the summer break, which is front foot onwards, Oscar Piastri has been ahead just once, which was in Baku. We clearly know what happened to Lando Norris in Baku.
Yeah.
But 3 of Piastri's largest qualifying gaps have come in the races since the summer break.
Exactly.
Sunfoot, half a second. Singapore, 4 tenths. Austin, 6 tenths. Okay, yes, track limit violations, time deleted, etc. I know there are lots of variables there. But my feeling is that Lando had that bit of reserve and he knew that, okay, this is it. I need to take that step up, and Lando's probably taken that step up in qualifying.
I often think, is Oscar slightly better than Lando at handling pressure? Sometimes, right? Because we've seen Oscar be the grittier one. He's able to stick through the battles more. Lando sometimes can be error prone. Don't tell that to Zach Brown. He'll disagree with you. But I think there's a difference between grit and pressure handling, because there's no more pressure-filled moment than qualifying. And Lando has been incredible at that. Maybe it's a mix of pressure handling and qualifying. Maybe it's just that Oscar has more grit than Lando. Given the circumstances, it's also fair, because look at what Oscar has had to go through to get to Formula One, shifting continents, moving the world to get there, getting through an academy, versus Lando, who is still in the same country when moving up that ladder. But on that front,
undergoing a controversy like McLaren and Alpine.
Exactly. Oscar might be the grittier / tougher one, but under pressure, I mean, I've been very impressed with what Lando's been doing in qualifying, and maybe that's where the next step for Oscar is, that little bit more confidence and that one lap pace. Again, not stopping to back him, but there's just that little bit missing.
And if it makes you feel any better, Soumil, Max Verstappen last won a race 9 races ago. That was the Spanish Grand Prix. Since then, Oscar Piastri has the most points of any driver, 160.
Even
Lando
now?
Norris comes. Yes.
No.
Since Max Verstappen's last win, Oscar Piastri has 160 points. Norris has 147. Verstappen has 135 points. He's 25 points clear of Verstappen himself.
That's very good. It's unbelievable.
So ultimately, the results are coming in. The points are coming in. Yes, there's a lot more to be improved on, but I'm sure that's going to happen.
On to my team of the weekend. Haas. Home race, double points in the sprint. Kevin Magnussen scoring points in the sprint for the very first time. And I loved what he said. I haven't driven a Formula One car for 7 weeks because of the long break in autumn that we had, and then he had the Singapore ban. So after Baku, he's literally landed up here. So it's been 7 weeks. And I think Kevin Magnussen probably drives better in the race after a break, because that's what we saw even when he came back to Formula One. And then Nico Hülkenberg slamming it all in. I mean, the Haas has jumped clear of Racing Bulls, and they scored in both formats, the sprint as well as the Grand Prix format. And they are a clear 6th place. And I think it's beautiful to see this turnaround. I think it's so beautiful that Nico Hülkenberg must be literally wondering, saying, goodness me, should I just have waited and not taken that Audi offer? Because Audi, as you clearly see, Valtteri Bottas is dropped to 23rd and last in the Drivers' Championship.
I like how the perception of Haas has changed within a season, from being remembered,
less than a season.
Yeah.
From being remembered for a very what do you say? Was the right word to describe Gunther Steiner? But yeah, to have such an iconic team principal, and not in terms of results, but just in terms of personality, and having 2 aggressive drivers, to now actually people appreciating Haas for the results that they bring on track and for whatever they do off track, and even in terms of sponsorships, people are genuinely recognizing Haas's efforts and results and performances for what it actually is. And I think it's one of the most loved teams that we have on the grid right now, and for very good sense, I would say.
Haas was always well followed for Gunther Steiner, I would say.
Yeah.
Now they're building a solid base of followers who genuinely appreciate a competitive team in Formula One. That's where I would put it. And that's what Gene Haas would have wanted, Ayao Komatsu would have wanted. And I love how, they've got Ocon and Behrman next year. A lot of pressure on them to see what can be capable of as well. But Soumil, you wanted the Constructors' Championship standings.
Yeah. Haas in 6th is unbelievable, considering the circumstances. I still am amazed that they're ahead of much bigger and more organized teams. At least in theory, more organized teams like Williams, Sauber, and Alpine. Alpine should be there, seriously. But
organized teams, Alpine? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, theoretically. But if we go to a different slide, I think it's the left or right, but whatever it is, that's the Spanish GP standings that we've got. The constructor standings after that. Haas only had 7 points at that stage. And since then, they've taken off, going past Alpine and RB. And look at how RB has stagnated since then. That's the weird part for me. Haas has been taking big leaps. This lower midfield battle is quite something.
And in the run-up to the race, I know we spoke about the Toyota partnership, but the smallest team in Formula One, literally speaking, could attract a partnership with the largest automobile manufacturer in the world.
Yeah.
What a beautiful story, right? But Racing Bulls, of course, scored a point, not without controversy for Liam Lawson. He came back. He's pissed off Fernando Alonso, which I think was another beautiful thing. Look at this image. There's so much. It's quite easy to a double overtake that happened on Fernando and on Liam. I think what Fernando was pissed was not just the double overtake, but the fact that an Alpine and Esteban Ocon went through. Oh, you cannot do that to me, But I think Liam Lawson, what a beautiful drive. His lap times in the race. He did the reverse strategy, and we saw that in the top 10. There were pretty much everyone who scored points finished with the one-stopper. So the top 5 drivers all started on the medium and then switched to the hard. George Russell started on the hard, 40 laps on the hard from the pit lane, switched to the medium. So he was the one who could break in. He used the medium tire advantage to overtake Checo Perez, who started on the medium and then switched to the hard, as did Nico Hülkenberg. But Lawson and Colapinto, 2 really star drivers from the race, started on the hard and then went on to the medium, which meant that they ran so much of their race in free air when they could, that they could build on consistent lap times and then just extract and sort of overcut a lot of their rivals. Lawson, in the case of Yuki Tsunoda, I'm sure you guys remember that message from Yuki saying, how did that happen? Well, that happened because Lawson just had more consistent lap times and Tsunoda did. And guess what? It's only their first race together this year. So very, very impressive. And then I think Colapinto, again, what a beautiful take. He, of course, said this in his native language. But I love that he has a character even outside of the car. And, this was because he had the fastest lap, 3 laps to the end, and Ocon pitted and took that point away from them. Okay, and that's when he said, why are they wasting tires? They should take care of the planet. Beautiful.
You know what? I'm not 100% sure about this. I read this somewhere. Maybe Kunal, you can correct me on this. I don't think so. Pirelli uses the same tires at another event, even if they go unused.
I'm pretty sure they have to, because if they are just
something to check
for a lot of time
for the next race. Because
that's
I read this somewhere.
Yeah. I'll be surprised from F1 sustainability point of view. What they probably do is they go get remodeled and so on. But I'm pretty sure they don't just throw them away. That would be blasphemy.
No, they don't
just
throw
distribute
them away.
It to fans.
They don't throw them away. They get crushed and they get made into other. They get recycled into other materials. But I read somewhere that these unused tires, they don't get it. Let's check.
That's a good question, because lots of questions we got through our Q&A as well on Instagram, which we've been running through the race weekend. So thank you everyone for sending in their questions. We loved answering them.
No, absolutely. And we should be back with more questions, with more stories for the next race as well. So folks, subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast, and we shall see you for the next episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll be back. Bye-bye.